大怪盗アルセーヌ・ルパンが残した不思議な宝物ルパンコレクションがギャングラーに奪われた。失ったものを取り戻すために戦う怪盗、世界の平和を守るために戦う警察、君はどっちを応援する？
Hello, and welcome to LupinRecap versus PatReview, the podcast that's stirring up a storm. I am your host, Lokamasi, and with me is my co-host, Fafnir Masamune.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
It's me. You just introduced me, and yet you won't let me in, Loka. Why?
I'll just state for the record, you're lucky I didn't respond with, it's Knuckles.
The bloat-thrower, independent goer, magical emerald holder.
Knock, knock, it's Knuckles. And then we would have just destroyed your opening.
Giving you the coolest shoulder.
But anyways, enough bizarre opening gags.
Enough reciting Knuckles' theme.
We're here to talk about episode 16 of Lupin Ranger versus Pot Ranger. But before that, I want to have a brief discussion on our favorite topic, character development. But I want to talk about developing multiple characters at the same time and how you can go about doing that. Or maybe put a different way, how an episode can be about multiple characters.
Mm-hmm.
But not those characters as a group, but those characters as individuals. So, we've been watching Avatar recently in our private lives, and I'm going to keep going back to it a lot because Avatar is an incredibly well-written show that uses a whole lot of tropes incredibly well. So if you need a good example, just go to the Avatar example and use it.
Yep.
But the entire show is simultaneously developing Aang and Zuko. And that's one way of doing this. You have A plots and B plots. But that's sort of the basic way of doing it. So the reason I thought of this is because what happens here today is how to use the same incident to develop multiple characters in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I guess an Avatar example of this would be the Blue Spirit, where the same action of Zuko rescuing Aang from prison shows Aang he could open up to Zuko and become a friend and just bury Zuko even deeper into his obsession. Do you have any thoughts on this topic? So I'm not just lecturing our audience, because I'm not qualified to lecture.
So yeah, it is fairly common, just in terms of, well, I guess first off it does kind of save time if you want to be kind of, what's the word?
Practical? Pragmatic?
Sure, we'll go with that. It's the polite way to say it, but you could be kind of rude in saying that, they're just doing multiple characters developing for this plot line to save time or something like that, but, it is a good idea. That kind of happens a lot in real life, too. The same event can change different people in different ways. So,
in fact, there are a lot of things that were that's the entire premise. That's the entire thing.
Yep.
For some reason, the only thing that's coming to mind is the book version of I Know What You Did Last Summer.
That's a deep cut.
Well, the book isn't a serial killer movie. It has the same setup, the same premise of a bunch of idiot teens accidentally kill someone with their car and then hide it, and then they think he's coming back to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, it's all about the fallout of everyone dealing with we killed a man, what do we do?
Yeah.
And the serial killer is one of the victims acting out, not one of the victims, one of the perpetrators acting out their guilt.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think he injures himself and puts himself in the hospital and then just sends threatening messages to everyone else.
Yeah. So
it's the same event, but everyone goes in wildly different directions with it.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of my own examples, I can't think of a specific one, but it's Mob Psycho 100, and that's on our to-watch list, so I don't want to bring up any examples of that. I guess, in terms of, relationships between characters, it's also sort of an important tool to use, in that, I guess, easy example, Joseph and Caesar from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2. because it's basically just these two characters have to adjust in certain ways because they've both got problems and they help each other along the way to sort of improve.
And of course, the great tragedy is that they don't adjust to each other enough before it really matters.
Yeah. And also I should mention, it's kind of the ideal way to go about, like, romantic relationships and stuff because, you know, way too often relationships are just so one-sided in media, and it's not great. Like, they don't have to have the exact same problems. You know, you can't have one character improve the other, but, like, it can't be all of one character improving this character's life, you know. There's got to be a little change from both sides, helping from both sides. Otherwise, one character is just a mentor figure. And even then, mentor figures do change when they're teaching people, so you're just not doing good writing.
The way it was explained to me is that a lot of writers view like romantic tension as a conflict, and that leads to them treating the romantic relationship as a conflict between the two characters.
Yep.
When ideally, that's not how you want to view your relationship.
It really isn't. Why do so many people screw this up?
Your relationship is like two people coming together to deal with their own conflicts or the other conflicts in the world, and there might be like a tension or a conflict between the two of them, but you overcome it together.
Mm-hmm.
You both, in a healthy relationship, you pretty much both want to stay together, so you want to overcome the things keeping you apart. Because if one person wants to leave, that's not a conflict, that's the end of the relationship.
Yeah.
It's over. I mean, people change their minds, I guess, but... So anyways, now that I got in my jab at mainstream writers not knowing how to write relationships...
Got him.
I suppose we can move on to the episode summary.
Alright, so, episode 16, Because We Are Comrades. Is there any other translation for this one?
Overtime said because we're friends.
You know, they're both kind of a little bit awkwardly worded.
Like, I like friends more, but, like, comrades is unique, I'll give it that.
They use the word comrade a lot in this episode, and, you know, I actually kind of think it fits a little more at this point in the show.
I was going to say, I just laughed a lot, but I do see what you're talking about, and that this is more about, like, the promise they made and the fact that they're both, like, in a war, essentially.
Yeah, and also just, in general, you know, the Lupin Rangers are sort of close-knit, but also distant as well.
This might be, like, I'm just going to hazard a guess and say this is problems with the word nakama.
Probably.
It usually is. I don't know a whole lot about Japanese, but I have read enough about localization and translation to know a few common problem areas. And nakama tends to be one in that it's essentially... Oh god, I have to actually say what nakama means. I don't know if I know. It's essentially a friend that you care about so much they're basically family.
Mm-hmm.
Which in English, we just have adjectives for that.
Yeah. I guess in terms of that translation, friends would be better.
Better than buddies and pals, or whatever the hell Zone of the Enders 2 was doing.
All my war buddies died.
They became my pals.
They became my pals, God. But anyway, funny you mention problems in translation, but we'll get to that later. So, we begin today with the police observing the remains of a Ganglar safe, which had been inside the crane. So, whatever the name of the older Crash brother was, it was that guy. Maybe there's a name that fits with a dodo? I don't know.
I think his name is Zadordo. Or Zadodo.
That is also a very good name.
So they're Adodo and Zadodo.
So the lab analysis they had received says that these safes are made of an unknown substance that's hard to damage from the outside, but fragile on the inside, which is why firing a blaster in there hurts, and why a special attack barreling through them causes them to explode. Jim theorizes that because the Ganglars can be revived by using the safe, it may be their true form, or a core. I'd like to take a moment to just imagine the society of Ganglars who don't take the shape of monsters but just stay as safes. Director Hilltop is also impressed with their ability to turn big when revived, which Jim suspects is due to an ability to change energy into mass. Which, yeah, that'd be quite the feat.
You know, a fucking miracle.
Anyway, this isn't a Pat Ranger episode, it's a Lupin episode. We find the Juror Trio out and about having bought groceries for the day, but a sudden "Yay!" from off-screen alerts them, and the Pat Rangers as well, to the presence of today's Ganglar, who, as it turns out, is just having a whole lot of fun firing off green fireballs that explode on contact. So, the opposite of Speedy Speed Ganglar, whose natural ability was explosives. This one's artificial.
I really like this Ganglar's introduction just because of like what they don't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Like they show the wedding procession running away and he's standing outside of a church, but I like to imagine that like this was the point where the minister said, "If there is anyone who objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." And he just kicked out the door and stepped out of the church.
Alternatively, it was him that said it, and then he transformed. We don't see his human form, you never know. He could have disguised as a priest.
Oh god, I have to look and see if there's a minister in that shot. That would be amazing.
If there is anyone who opposes this union. Oh, wait a minute, that's me! Yay! So the Juror Trio confront this Manta Ray Ganglar without having transformed, and thankfully there's nobody else around or they would have just blown their cover. They introduce themselves, then Kaito change, much to Manta Ray's horror. Roll the intro. And once we return, Ganglar Ray is complaining about being found so quickly. But when the thieves expect an easy victory, Ganglar Ray reveals his natural power. He fires 2 beams. One hits yellow, the other a dove. He then shouts change, and Umika switches bodies with the bird. Ray brags about switching their bodies, and the remaining Rangers are incredulous. He can't possibly be able to do something like that, Blue says.
I love Overtime's take on that line because all he says is, "Sounds fake."
Ray takes that as an insult and switches Umika and the pigeon back into their own bodies, just to prove that he can body swap people. Whoops.
Which doesn't even make sense because like now there's even less proof that he body swapped people. Because now Umika's acting like Umika instead of like a bird.
So Red and a very angry Yellow grab Ray, leaving Blue to rush in and snag the treasure. But Ray breaks free of their hold and aims for Blue and another dove. One hits the target, catching Blue completely by surprise. The other fires past the dove that just flew away, reflects off of a mirror, and hits Ray instead. He then swaps bodies with Tuma. Tuma Ray panics because his tiny body is very weird, but Ganglar Blue is just angry, so he goes in to punch Tuma Ray. Tuma Ray de-transforms at the worst possible moment as the Pat Rangers finally arrive on the scene. Things look bad as Ganglar Blue tries to pummel his former body, and the Pat Rangers move to protect him. Which means that Red and Yellow have to go save Ganglar Blue from being shot dead. For a moment, Tuma Ray considers returning to his body, but hesitates when he realizes he'd be getting his ass kicked if he went back now. So he comically runs off. Meanwhile, Red and Yellow manage to get the Pat Rangers off of Ganglar Blue, which of course leads to a misunderstanding. But the Lupin Rangers don't bother attempting to explain and decide to retreat. Miles away, Tuma Ray continues his frantic escape until he gets distracted by his terrible thin arms and lack of handholds. Really, what an awful body. Just
I
the
love that
worst.
line so much. Like, these hands don't even have holes in them.
This is bullshit. But at least that's what he thinks before running into a random girl, and manages to firearm carry her before she hits the ground. The screen brightens as the girl is instantly smitten with Tuma, which, yeah, I get it. Much to Tuma Ray's confusion, she and another girl who runs in out of nowhere want to take a picture with him. So while Tuma Ray may hate his terrible, tiny, awkward body to a certain extent, he's handsome for the first time in his life. things are going less well for the juror trio, because one of them is in the body of a hell mobster who needs a tarp over his body to get him home without causing panic. They make it back to the restaurant without incident, though they do have trouble getting Gangler Blue through the door. Blue apologizes, but the group doesn't have much time to rest as the cops approach the restaurant. Blue is put back under the tarp and sent to the back of the restaurant, while Kyrie does his best to distract the cops. Kyrie mentions that the sign should say closed, but the door is unlocked, so either the cops didn't pay attention, or Kyrie really needs to remember to flip the sign over. Seriously, sometimes the restaurant doesn't keep running when you leave, Kyrie.
I was gonna say, I always read that line as Kyrie, like, lying that the sign said open. But yeah, they were out, so it should have said closed. The way he delivers that line, it's so, like, coy and... like, this is how people in fiction lie. That it never occurred to me he was telling the truth. It should have said closed because no one was there.
Yep.
Unless he instinctively flipped the sign around when he walked in.
Why would you do that, Kyrie? You'd think that would be the last thing Kyrie would do. Maybe Umika did it. Oh, I'm in the restaurant now. Because I don't think Kyrie would have the sense to do that.
If anyone, it would be Toma, and we all know he didn't do it.
Regardless, Kaichiro asks if Tuma had returned yet, since he was being attacked. Kyrie and Umika tell them that Tuma has a cold, which is why the restaurant is closed. But keen-eyed Tsukasa notices the strange tarp on the back of the room and tells everyone not to move. She walks over the tarp, and Sakia prevents Kyrie or Umika from going over. Tsukasa stands over the tarp where Gangler Blue is hiding, raises both arms in the air. Kyrie and Umika shut their eyes and prepare for the worst. And Tsukasa claps. Everyone is confused, and she responds by saying she thought there was a mosquito, but it was just dust. I like that this is protocol for a mosquito.
Like, was there a malaria outbreak off screen? Why is she freaking out so much? It's not even like, it's a bee and I'm allergic to bees. Or, it's a bee and Keiichiro's allergic to bees.
Alright, nobody move. There's a single mosquito. Sakia, don't let anybody off the premises. This restaurant is in a state of quarantine until this mosquito dies. So everyone looks relieved, until Tsukasa, stressed from the potential of a mosquito, sits down on the tarp. Kyrie and Umika run over and stand her up, and Tsukasa, wondering if there's anything important under it, very nearly lifts the tarp. But Kyrie says that it's just trash, and for some reason he and Umika just start beating on poor Blue to prove that it's trash. Sure, yeah, that works.
I like the gag, but yeah, it doesn't really flow logically, does it?
The cops leave and Umika apologizes, which, really, Blue should be a bit more mad. None of that was necessary. Nobody kicks their tarp of trash. That ruse made no sense. Gangler Blue attempts to return to his own body, but nothing happens. Although he's in the Gangler's body, he can't use the power. Kyrie realizes that means that Tumare has the power instead and rushes out a juror.
Hey, quick observation.
Mm-hmm.
What if that did work? There would have been an incredibly pissed off Ganglar in the middle of Bistro Juror. Toma, I know you're anxious.
Oh my god.
But what the fuck?
Well, guess we're gonna have to deal with this Ganglar. Guess our restaurant's ruined.
I want the version where Toma goes to say change and they just go, wait! And Kaito change. Alright, now say it.
So elsewhere, the cops are calling in to see if Jim has any info on the Ganglar, but he doesn't. Suddenly, Sakia spots something and points off screen. It's Tuma, surrounded by a group of girls, and offering to buy them stuff. Tumare still keeps the yay tick, though. The cops, prone to misunderstandings in this episode, figure that Tuma just faked being sick to hang out and flirt. They all even discussed, except Sakia, who's probably jealous. As they leave, Kyrie happens upon the scene, and he's not happy. And after a commercial break, the girls have vanished and Kairi and Tumaray are just suddenly on a roof. Tumaray refuses to return to his own body because he's popular. Kairi nearly decks him, but it's Tuma's body, so he hesitates. Tumaray taunts Kairi before kneeing him and tossing him over. Tumaray Kaido changes, so I guess there's no dang point to these safe dials that the Versus Changers have. I'd also like to point out that when he does change, he points the gun at Kairi and fires. It's the transformation fire, but still.
Also, I guess the Ganglars know the same way the Lupins know.
Just
Because no one told Kairi what, the combination for Cyclone and Scissors were. He just knew.
It's just printed right there on it.
There's a sticky note, like every computer you've ever had in a workplace.
Just has the code right on it. Kokure's elsewhere just really shouldn't have put that on there.
No, Kokure's the one that did it because he's so old. He can't remember that many passwords.
Sorry, Master Lupin. I don't remember these. My dark magics don't give me the thing to remember the password.
I also wanted to comment on this scene. This whole episode, really, Toma's actor, Shogohama, is just cutting loose.
Yeah, God.
He is
Scenery
losing
chewing
his goddamn mind.
just does not begin to describe it.
I want to hear what these scenes sounded like before they dubbed in the Ganglar. I want to hear Toma's incredibly deep voice fucking go off the deep end like this.
Yep.
I just want to know what that sounds like, because I literally cannot imagine that voice doing this.
Honestly, no matter if he just lip-synced without actually speaking or if he did speak, either way, that is wild. So Tumaray announces his intent to rob a bank and makes his escape. Kairi's left alone on the roof, bleeding slightly, and mad. Very, very mad. Back at Jure, Umika has decided to unlock Ganglar Blue's safe 1, 2, 7, since he's right there and all. Umika unenthusiastically retrieves the Belle Ball de Feu. Kairi returns in a terrible mood and asks to talk to Ganglar Blue. They walk outside, and Kairi tells Tuma that Ray doesn't want to go back to his body. Tuma tells Kairi not to hold back. He's prepared for the worst since it's more important to retrieve the collection. He then reminds Kairi of their promise, and supposes that he'll be the first to fall. Kairi looks at his Versus Changer and says he'll do it. The next day, at some warehouse or otherwise abandoned property, Tumaray is
I had a quick question on that last scene. Do you remember if Toma was talking in the... what tense Toma was talking in about him falling? Because, what you said is he says he'd be the first to fall. I'm asking because in overtime, he's already talking in the past tense.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I know it's kind of absurd for me to expect you to remember, but I figured I'd ask, because I do think it's interesting in overtime when he says, I was just the first to fall. He's already given up.
Yeah, it might have been past tense.
He already assumes Kairi is going to murder him.
Look, Kairi, I know you.
Well, really, this says more about Toma than it does Kairi, doesn't it?
Yep.
But we can talk about that later, after we have all the information.
The next day, at some warehouse or otherwise abandoned property, Tumaray is checking his texts when he sees the Jure trio approach. It turns out they'd called him to request a fight. Kairi wants to fight one-on-one, their collection piece for Tuma's body. Tumaray thinks he already knows the outcome, but a solemn Kairi says he's going to go all out. The two Kaito change and fights, and I'd also like to point out before they start fighting, same as the other scene where Blue transforms, they both fire at one another, but it's just the transformation. I just like that detail of just constantly using that as the positioning. So they fight until Red tackles Blue Ray to the ground and points his gun. But another moment's hesitation allows Blu-ray to push Red off, shoot his legs, and tackle him over. He then starts firing wildly, and Red stumbles behind cover. Ganglar Blue shouts at Red for holding back, and after taking a moment to ready himself, Red charges in and starts beating the hell out of Blu-ray, eventually forcing him to de-transform by firing while his gun's spinning. They usually use that sort of thing for the Poet of Men, but man, that just looked painful there. It's just a vertical spin.
Also, it's sort of implied that the Pat Rangers have the stronger armor, so it's not quite 10 tons of TNT level. But I assume it's something similar, at least. So 5 tons of TNT were in those shots.
Not quite enough to blow up a Ganglar safe, apparently, but Ray tries to reach for the Versus Changer, but Red stops him, placing the gun on his chest. Ray is certain Red won't shoot him, but Red moves his gun over Tuma Blue's heart. The moment Red fires, Ray swaps back to his own body. Tuma, now in his own body, collapses to the ground. Ray, angry that Red had the nerve to nearly kill him, just shoots him with some electricity. Not the body swap one this time, this is just the pain attack. Ray then grabs Umika, intending to kill the Phantom Thieves, but is stopped by gunfire from Tuma. Red then reveals his plan. He knew that Ray would only change back if he thought he was in danger, so just before he fired, he aimed higher and placed his own hand in front of the gun to reduce the damage he'd do. Tuma remarks that it still hurts. Ray proclaims that plan was ridiculous, though Tuma just thinks it was reckless since there is a chance Ray might not have changed back. Red says he would have just fired again. The rest of the Lupin Rangers Kaito change and go through the usual roll call. And of course, now's as good a time as any for a good striker to wander in.
Real quick, I want to point out that this time Toma gets to be in the middle.
Yep.
Instead of Red.
You've had a bad day, Tuma.
You're taking one down.
I'm not humoring that. Red multiplies, making Ray's day that much worse. Red then hands Cyclone and Scissors over to his companions. His actual companions, not his clone companions. Ray tries to stop them, but Blue blocks the attack with his shield. The Lupin Rangers then line up and activate Stealing Strike, in which all of them just combine their attacks. It's whatever the triple attack from the Reds was called, plus the Cyclone and Blade attacks as well. Ray extremely explodes. Naturally, this is followed up by Ghosh arriving on the scene to revive him. But she also chastises him, telling him not to hit on girls this time. Which means, for some reason, Doug Ranio must have been watching this entire time.
Oh, what was the gag we had when we were watching the episode that we wanted Dacer to try and set up like a picture-in-picture or a second monitor and they can't figure out how to get it to work?
Oh yeah, this isn't even a Ganglar who's really expressed that much interest in wanting to take over. I guess they just went, hey, here's a Ganglar who's doing stuff. Oh, what's he doing? And then he just sees Tuma just skipping through town, rather.
Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time.
Destra, what is this?
This is the second worst Ganglar I've ever seen.
I can't believe I gave him a collection piece, but at the same time, second worst means he still gets a collection piece. Actually, third worst because Roulette Frog still exists. Maybe he just wasn't watching that day, and that's why Ghosh didn't come in.
Yeah.
What happened to Roulette Frog? You weren't watching him because, oddly enough, you hate gambling, sir.
I can't wait for the last episode where Roulette Frog makes a triumphant comeback and is immediately killed by whatever ridiculous Zord they have by that point.
So we then cut to the Pat Rangers some distance away, who see Ray revive and become gigantic. Sakia wonders why he's already big, and then they hear Goody's voice. The Lupin Kaiser is formed mostly off-screen, and the cops realize that the thieves must have defeated him. which clears up one misunderstanding at least. During the battle, Big Ray reveals that he's not a complete pushover. After a big leap, he begins soaring through the sky, doing considerable damage to the Lupin Kaiser by swooping into it and firing electricity from a distance. At least until the Lupin Kaiser stops his momentum with machine gun fire and punches him with a buzzsaw. Since flying didn't work, Big Ray decides to try swapping the Kaiser with a building. The Lupin Rangers change out both arms to stop this, forming the Lupin Kaiser Cyclone Knights, and they follow that up with the Good Striker Shootout Flash, in which they fire a tornado, then fire the blade vehicle through it, right into Big Ray. It's pretty fast for a special attack, but cool nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
So, Big Ray's final words do not translate at all. Apparently, IEI, which sounds like yay, is Japanese for a photo of a deceased person. That's what the translator's note says, though. In practice, Big Ray says that he's become a photo of a dead person, which sounds awkward and does not convey the pun at all.
Yeah,
Did they change it in the version you watched?
Yeah, instead of, like, sticking with the, original line and putting a note, they just have him say, "I've yayed my last yay!" Which is fine.
Yeah, that works better, because the pun they used is literally impossible to translate.
Yeah, it also doesn't even work because to an English speaker, the photo of the dead person is pronounced EA, but yay is pronounced yay. You don't pronounce the Y as much as you do with a Japanese accent.
Yeah, so yayed my last yay is way better.
Mm-hmm.
So, one eternal adieu later, and we conclude the episode at jour. Tuma is giving the cops coffee, at which point they decide it's time for an intervention. Sakia sits Tuma down, and Tsukasa berates him for lying to his friends about being sick so he can go out with girls. Tuma's just confused because he barely knew what Ray did in his body. Then even Sakia gets on his case, while Kaiichiro drinks his coffee in a judgmental manner. I like this reaction more than the one earlier, and the one earlier was good. When he sees Ray and Tuma's body, he just says, like, was it Craven or something like that?
That sounds right.
But God, I just love his judgmental stare as he's drinking coffee.
Mm-hmm. I like Sakia giving up his seat. He's just so genuine about everything.
And just putting Tuma down into it.
Mm-hmm.
We then
just even like his line in that is like, "This may sound hypocritical coming from me, but
I know it's me saying this."
Yeah. So
God.
He wants what's best for Toma. Like, genuinely though.
I always love that sort of line. Like in Fire Emblem Awakening, if Virion is the father of Inigo, at one point, he's just like, "It's like you only inherited one aspect of my
personality."
Which, like, is a good line, but also Inigo's way better than Virion. But this isn't about Fire Emblem, so... We then get another pun that doesn't work at all, in which Tuma says that it's just a misunderstanding, the Japanese here being Gokai. Tsukasa then responds by asking if there's a fifth floor Gokai, is there a sixth too? Which I cannot begin to understand that joke at all.
Well, I know Go is 5, so I kind of understand. That feels like a phrase that people say and just know what it means. Like raining cats and dogs. Like,
yeah. Did they translate that any differently in your version?
Thomas says it's a misunderstanding, and Tsukasa says, "I don't care what kind of standing it is."
Okay, that works a little better.
It's still weird because it's also not a thing that people really say, but...
Yeah.
I get it.
You had to put a joke there.
Yeah, because this is a really weird comedic scene.
You tried. Tuma turns to his friends for help, but neither Kairi nor Umika are ready to fish him out of this mess. We then end this episode with Tuma cursing Ray, unable to save his reputation on this day.
If only I could kill him a second time.
Third.
Right, third. Fuck, you already killed him a second time. I can't keep track of this.
Alright, so that's the episode.
That is the episode. Now, let's talk about the Ganglar.
Right, so...
God, he's obnoxious.
I don't know if they mentioned it in the episode, but his name is Manta Bayarsh, apparently.
Well, I know where Manta came from. No idea what Bayarsh means.
Me neither. But anyway, the bright side is...
And I know his collection piece is, like, Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah.
Which, I forget who sang that song, but I know the song.
He did allow Tuma's actor to just really ham it up this episode. Actually, both of his actors, because the suit actor also put in some work.
I get that he has to be super obnoxious to make like him being having taken over Toma more of a threat, but it also just makes me want to strangle him every time he is on screen. I hate this Ganglar so much. And I already mentioned I'm glad they finally gave Shogo Hama an excuse to emote. That's where it went. That's where all the emoting went that isn't sad.
Yep. But, yeah, he really didn't have much of a goal outside of just he causes some destruction in the beginning and then fucks up a whole lot. And then he's just, oh, well, people find me attractive now. Guess I'll do this. And poor Degranio is just there, wondering where it all went wrong. Degranio just sitting there, oh god, nobody's going to be my successor.
He sets down the wine glass and pulls out a bigger wine glass.
I'm going to die and there's nobody who's going to be worthy of taking over my business.
He pours out the wine glass and fills it with, like, liquor. We're gonna need some stronger wine. That's enough about the Ganglar. He creates a neat conflict for the episode. And I do want to talk about that because obviously this isn't the first time something like this has happened in Sentai.
Mm-hmm.
Or Power Rangers, probably. But most of the time, people don't promise each other they're going to kill each other if they have to.
Yep.
And it does create, like, a lot more tension than would otherwise normally be here. I forgot to ask when we were actually watching the episode, but at any point, did you think that Toma did or would die?
Nah.
Okay.
It's Sentai, no... Okay, actually, to be fair, I don't know that much Sentai. There's probably at least, like, one where a character is killed off permanently, but I don't think it's a norm.
We're not... I doubt we'll go back and watch the first Sentai because it's twice as long as all the other Sentais and worse. But, yeah, people died in the first Sentai.
Oh.
Whatever the Yellow Ranger was, they, like, brought in a replacement or stand-in or substitute for a few episodes, and then he got stabbed and died.
Oh, dear.
In a fight. And, like, it's actually really jarring to watch because the knife comes at him and there's no, like, explosions or special effects. He's just stabbed and he dies.
Jeez.
So, Rangers die. I don't know how often it happens recently, but Rangers can die. That's why they have them behind the mask so they can swap it out if someone dies.
Well, I guess I'm more familiar with Power Rangers conceptually then, because that probably didn't happen in Power Rangers much.
Probably not. Probably at least once, though.
But yeah, I think especially...
You know how it is.
Yeah, I think especially with Lupat, each team only has 3 characters, so it would be really difficult to kill any of them off.
Yeah, they would have to bring in a replacement ranger.
Mm-hmm.
Which they can. Hey, we know that Emma has trouble with her sister. What if her sister died off screen?
And I know, just conceptually, there's going to be another ranger at one point, because there's always that normally 6th ranger, in this case 7th ranger.
There's always that fucker. Last season, there were more like auxiliary rangers than normal rangers. There were like 12 rangers last season.
Just make your own team at that point. Jeez.
But this is obviously what I was like alluding to in the earlier part of the episode of the conflict that develops both characters in separate directions at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because this demonstrates 100% Toma will fulfill that promise.
Yep.
He's putting himself on the line, so it comes across as more heroic. But when he says, I understand if you shoot me, he's also saying, and you should understand if I shoot you.
Yep. But
and
Kairi...
I do like that this is the way it comes out. I know you played 999. It reminds me of Lotus spends the entire game talking about how, like, oh, it's just the math. We need to leave people behind. And then the last, like, path, her number ends up being left behind and she's completely okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like, I've been saying this entire time, it's just the math. You need to leave people behind. I'm fine.
Yep.
Only this is in reverse order, where we see the noble version of it first, and then eventually we might have to deal with the less noble version.
Yeah. Surprisingly, though, well, no, that's not that surprising that Kairi would be at least a little bit heroic, because lazy a bastard as he is, he does like other people.
Mm-hmm.
I do like how crafty he is, and also this goes back to the discussion we had in the last episode, of sort of the difference between the Rangers, whereas the Pat Rangers talk to each other a lot, they're very close-knit, they plan well together. Here, I don't think any of this was planned. Well, it definitely wasn't, because nobody but Kairi knew what Kairi's plan was.
I don't know if Kairi knew what Kairi's plan was until the very last second.
Mm-hmm. But he was still determined to help his teammates, and he even had no qualm with shooting himself in the hand.
This also, like, highlights the difference in that Kairi overcomes it through, like, a trick.
Yeah.
Through, like, sleight of hand, whereas, I don't even know how Keiichiro would have solved this. He would have just beaten Sakia with the baton until the guy or something. I don't know. I do want to talk about the moment where Kairi is about to straight up execute Toma.
Oh wait, I do have an idea of how he would get Rei out of Sakia's body.
How?
Throw him at Umika. Here's the one girl who doesn't find you cute. And he's like, well, oh, okay, back to my own body, I guess.
Oh no, because that means Umika would have to walk up to regular Rei and flirt with him.
Oh no, I didn't consider that. Never mind, abort.
Anyways, just a couple of things, not really like deep analysis, just things I like about Kairi's execution of Toma.
Mm-hmm.
The moment where he shifts the barrel of the gun from the center of his chest to his heart just evokes a really specific feeling in me that I don't know how to describe.
It just that slow shift over.
It's just like, if this weren't a, you're in my friend's body, this is a hard thing, this would be like one of the most intimidating things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to shoot you and I need to make sure that I kill you.
You're going to be extremely dead, my dude.
Obviously, I really like him shifting the gun and, like, the idea that he, like, shifts the gun up with his offhand and then shoots through his offhand at the same time.
Yep.
It's something that could have been, like, reasonably done that quickly in Fool.
Right.
Black Manta, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, it's much more possible than, say, the mask thing with Umika and Tsukasa. Sleight of hand did not even begin to describe that.
Mm-hmm. And just one last thing that I liked, when they transform and they do the snap, they snap their fingers and introduce themselves. Kairi does it and then just, like, cringes and shakes his hand.
Yep.
It's really good. This show's really good about paying attention to, like, who is in pain.
Yeah.
And how they would be reacting.
Good little details. But I don't think I have anything much else to talk about myself. Pretty much
Yeah,
covered
this
it.
is it's a good episode, but like a lot of these episodes, it wears its characterization on its sleeves.
Yep.
And it's fun to talk about, like, Kyrie executing Toma, but only for so long. This episode doesn't really set up predictions.
Yeah, thought I had something I wanted to mention, but I forgot what that might be, so...
I will say, I guess this is yet another payoff to the whole, your way early prediction of, the promise to leave each other behind being called into question.
I'll admit they have been going back to that more than I thought they would. Like, I thought it would be a thing where they just, like, mention at the beginning, and then later on there'd be, like, one big scene dedicated to it, and just defying it, but they've brought it up a fair few times by this point, and it's still kind of dubious as to whether or not that'll actually be fulfilled.
Yeah, I think this clearly establishes that Toma 100% believes in the promise.
Yep.
And will carry it out. I do think that if push came to shove, Kyrie absolutely would kill Toma. But he is willing to go through a lot to make sure that it is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
So it's like the odds of it actually happening are very low.
I have to wonder if this action in this episode is something he always would have done, or if this was inspired by Kaiichiro from a few episodes ago. From just that moment of
Maybe
seeing him going through so much for what at the time he didn't realize was for any huge reason. You know, he was confused by that action.
Well, Keiichiro was acting for a group of school children he'd never met.
Yeah.
And Kyrie is acting for Toma, so I think that he always would do what he did in this episode. But
yeah,
I
makes
do
sense.
think you're right in that Keiichiro's personality is starting to get into Kyrie's mind.
Yeah. Plus, also, Kaiichiro almost died, whereas, you know, firing through your own hand hurts, but he'll get over it.
Look, Keiichiro suffered for 2 episodes. You barely suffered for like a couple of minutes. I don't want to say barely suffered, but you know what I mean.
Just shake it off, you baby. Jeez. It's just a hole through the hand.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
All right. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at LRVSPR. Fefner is at Fefner Masamune. If you want to email us, you can email us at LupinRecap vs PatReview at gmail.com. And we will see you in the next episode.
Adieu.